Honey, let's get a divorce. Claire sat on the sofa, her long legs clad in black stockings casually crossed, holding a printed divorce agreement in her hand. Her voice was as calm as if she were discussing what to have for dinner, but I noticed, her fingertips were white, the paper clutched too tightly. My hand, which had been massaging her calf, paused. This woman was up to something again. The living room fell silent for 3 seconds. I quickly ran through my mind. No recent fights, no Cold Wars. I gave her a gift for her birthday, and I remembered our wedding anniversary. So what was she playing at? Can't figure it out. Then just play dumb. I lifted my head, widened my eyes, and turned down the corners of my mouth. This was my innocent expression that I'd practiced for 3 years, and it never failed. You heartless bastard, I accused. Only 3 years into marriage and you already want to trade me in? She didn't respond. She just set the divorce papers on the coffee table, crossed her arms, and lifted her chin slightly. Her standard negotiation mode pose. I'm serious. So am I. I let go of her legs, stood up, and looked down at her. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days, Claire. You can't even get the dates right, and you want to dump me? She was momentarily stunned. Of course I remembered clearly. The day we got married, the day we first met, the day we first held hands. I remembered every important date. She thought I didn't care, but the truth was, I cared more than anyone. But now wasn't the time to pledge my loyalty. The date doesn't matter. What matters is, it does. I cut her off, suddenly bending down and grabbing her ankle, pressing the sole of her foot against my chest. Her eyes widened in shock. What are you doing? Before she could finish, I brought my nose close and took a deep sniff. TSK. Still the same familiar scent. Her face instantly flushed bright red. Owen, you pervert. She lifted her foot to kick me, but I had her ankle in my grip, and she couldn't break free. I smoothly placed her foot back on the sofa, plopped down beside her, draped my arm over her shoulder, and acted as if nothing had happened, as bold as brass.
Fine. I seid. Mig tonelejt.
What can I say? I can't live without you. So the 3 of us living together, that's not out of the question either. Her mind froze for a second. 3 people. You, me, and your divorce papers. I nodded toward the sheet on the coffee table. It counts as a family member too, considering how carefully you printed it out. She took a deep breath. I knew she was holding back. This woman had a sharp tongue, but her temper wasn't actually that bad, as long as I didn't push it too far. She pulled her foot back from my hand, shifted to the other end of the sofa to create a safe distance, then said seriously, Owen, I'm not joking. I know. I dropped the playful grin and turned to face her. But do you know why I don't want a divorce? She didn't say anything. Because you won't even give me a reason. My voice dropped low. 3 years, you've never once told me what's bothering you. You just bottle it all up until you shove a divorce agreement in my face. Do you think that's fair? The living room fell silent again. She lowered her eyes, her lashes trembling slightly. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking about her parents, about that failed marriage, about, what if one day, Owen leaves too? She didn't say it, but I knew. 3 years of marriage, and I understood her better than anyone. I just feel like, she finally spoke, her voice much softer than before. We're drifting further and further apart. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I smiled. Not a cheeky grin, but a gentle, helpless sort of smile. Claire, you're as stubborn as a rock. I reached out, picked up the divorce papers from the coffee table, and waved them in my hand. Tell you what, I'll give you a chance. What chance? To play a game. She looked stunned. Question mark. You're playing a game with me? I said, folding the divorce agreement and tucking it into my pocket. If you win, I'll sign it. If I win. I paused, the corner of my mouth lifting slightly. You take back this paper, and then tell me what you're really afraid of. She glared at me. What kind of condition was that? If she won, I'd sign. If she lost, she'd have to open up? No matter how you looked at it, I came out ahead. Why should I? Because you don't dare. I leaned back into the sofa, hands behind my head, looking utterly confident. Claire, you don't even have the guts to play a game with me?
À provocation.
Low, immature, ridiculous. But Claire couldn't stand being provoked. Fine, let's play. She gritted her teeth. Who's afraid of who? The curve of my lips widened. Hook. line and sinker. From the very first round, I decided to let her win, because I wanted to use this clumsy way to tell her that I had never thought of leaving. Then let's start with the simplest one. I got up and went to the study, returning a moment later with a stack of paper cups. First round, basic Q&A. The rules are simple, I said, lining up the paper cups in a row. I ask, you answer. You ask, I answer. Correct answers earn points, wrong answers lose points. Whoever has the highest score at the end wins. She raised an eyebrow. That's it. That's it. I sat back down across from her, my knees almost touching hers. But I leaned in a little closer, lowering my voice. Whoever can't answer has to accept a punishment. Her heart skipped a beat. I heard it, but her expression remained unreadable. What punishment? We'll see about that then. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Yeah, on purpose. I smiled openly. Who told you to divorce me? She took a deep breath, looking full of fighting spirit, no doubt already plotting how to make me lose fair and square. I looked at her, but my mind was elsewhere. Fool, how could I ever let you lose? The next morning, as I was about to head out, her phone rang. She answered, and her expression suddenly changed. What? The proposal was leaked. I stopped what I was doing and turned to look at her. All right, I'll head to the office right now. She hung up the phone, her face pale and grim. What's wrong? I asked. The project I was in charge of. She bit her lip. The proposal was leaked to a competitor. The client just called to complain. Who leaked it? I don't know. She shook her head. But I suspect it's Rachel. Rachel. I knew that name. She was the creative deputy director at her company, and they'd never gotten along. I'll go check it out. She grabbed her bag, ready to leave. Wait. I stopped her. I'll drive you. No need, you have to go to work yourself. I'll take you. I repeated, my tone leaving no room for argument. I know more about this kind of thing than you do. She paused for a moment, then nodded. She knew what I did for a living, a partner at an investment firm who had seen too many corporate battles. This kind of petty trick was child's play to me. In the conference room, the atmosphere was tense and confrontational. Claire, the client's representative, said coldly, we paid you millions to develop this proposal, only to see something similar pop up at a competitor's office shortly after. How are we supposed to trust you? She stood at the conference table, pale-faced, but her back was ramrod straight. Mr. Peterson, we will definitely get to the bottom of this. What good will getting to the bottom of it do? Rachel suddenly spoke up, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. The proposal has already been leaked. Who's going to take responsibility for the client's losses? Claire, as the project lead, shouldn't you be accountable? She turned to look at Rachel. This woman hadn't stopped her petty schemes since she was promoted to creative director. Stealing resources, poaching her team, bad-mouthing her in front of the higher-ups. But she never imagined Rachel would go this far. Rachel? Her voice was icy cold. Are you saying I leaked the proposal? I never said that. Rachel spread her hands. But the facts are right here. You were in charge of the proposal and the leak came from your end. As a colleague, I'm just helping the client get to the bottom of things. You. Enough. My voice suddenly cut in. Everyone in the meeting room turned to look at me. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, posture relaxed. Who is this? The client frowned. Owen. I walked into the conference room and stood beside her. Representative of the investor for Claire's advertisement. The moment those words were spoken, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Rachel's face stiffened. Of course she knew me. Claire's husband, Owen, a name with some weight in the investment circle. But she hadn't expected me to show up here. Mr. Owen. The client's attitude changed as well. What brings you here? I heard there was some issue with my investment. I smiled. Came to take a look. I walked over to the conference table, picked up the leaked proposal, and skimmed through it quickly. Mr. Peterson, I set the document down. You mentioned this proposal is similar to a competitor's. May I see theirs? The client paused for a moment, then had his assistant send over the competitor's proposal. I compared the two for a while, then smiled. Interesting. Mr. Owen, what did you find? She asked. Two proposals, superficially similar indeed. I pointed to a few details. But look here, Claire's proposal uses strategy A, while the competitor uses strategy B. If it were truly a leak, Why would there be such a fundamental difference? The client frowned. Well, and here, I flipped to another page. Claire's data analysis used internal data provided by our investors, which is confidential. The competitor's proposal doesn't contain any of this data at all. If they had actually obtained a leaked proposal, how could they possibly not use this data? The conference room fell silent. So what you're saying is? The client hesitated. What I'm saying is, I looked the client straight in the eye. The competitor's proposal wasn't leaked by Claire. They might have obtained some information through other channels and then filled in the rest themselves. As for the leak itself, I turned to look at Rachel. Rachel, don't you think so? Her expression shifted. Mr. Owen, what do you mean by that? Nothing in particular. I smiled. I just find it strange. Claire's proposal was only finalized last Friday, yet the competitor's version appeared in the client's inbox even earlier. If the leak came from Claire's side, the timing doesn't add up. That was prepared in advance by the competitor themselves. That's even stranger. I cut her off. If the competitor had already prepared their proposal, why would they leak Claire's proposal? Unless, I paused, my gaze sharp. Unless someone deliberately created the illusion of a leak to frame Claire. The conference room erupted into chaos. Mr. Owen, are you accusing me? She stood up, her voice sharp. I didn't say that. I spread my hands. I'm just analyzing the facts. You, Rachel. She suddenly spoke, her voice calm. At last Friday's finalization meeting, you were 20 minutes late. You said you were stuck in traffic. Rachel's face stiffened. But I saw a parking ticket on your desk, she continued. Dated Friday at 9:45 a.m. at the Imperial Tower. That's the office building of the client's competitor. Everyone turned to look at Rachel. You're stalking me? Her voice trembled. I wasn't following you. She shook her head. That parking ticket was something you left on the table yourself. I just happened to see it. Rachel's face completely changed color. So, I began, my tone calm. Rachel, don't you think you should explain why you were at the competitor's office building on Friday morning? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. All right. The client stood up, his face ashen. We'll look into this matter. Claire, our apologies for the misunderstanding. It's fine. She nodded. We'll cooperate with the investigation. The client left with his people, leaving just the three of us in the conference room. Rachel gritted her teeth, glaring at Claire. Claire, you win, she sneered. But don't get too cocky. This circle is small and one day. Rachel? I cut her off, my voice turning cold. Do you know what reputation means in the investment world? She froze for a moment. What you did today, I continued, is enough to make it impossible for you to get anywhere in this industry. It's not a threat from me, but, I smiled. No one would want to cooperate with someone who leaks trade secrets. Her face instantly turned pale. She knew I was telling the truth. You. She gritted her teeth. Just you wait. She slammed the door behind her, the sharp sound echoing loudly through the empty conference room. She stood still, her shoulders trembling slightly. Claire. I walked over to her and took her hand. It's okay now. She looked up, her eyes slightly reddened. Owen. Thank you. I smiled and ruffled her hair. Silly, you're my wife. Who else would I help if not you? She buried her face in my chest and mumbled. You were really cool just now. I was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing. You only think I'm handsome now? Shut up. All right, I'll shut up. I held her tight, my chin resting on the top of her head. Her body was trembling slightly. I knew it wasn't just because of the crisis we just faced, but also because she suddenly realized someone had been watching over her all along. Claire, I said softly. The game from last night isn't over yet. She looked up at me. Do you remember? She paused for a moment, then nodded. I remember. Then let's continue tonight, I said with a smile. You haven't won yet. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly. Okay. When we got home that evening, her mood was noticeably much better. First question. Cleared my throat. What's your favorite color? She felt this question was practically an insult to her intelligence. Blue, she blurted out. Why are you asking this? What a waste of time. Wrong. She froze. What? I wagged my finger. a look of regret on my face. The correct answer is the color of the wedding dress you wore on your wedding day. The image of her wedding day flashed through her mind. That dress was champagne, not blue. You're messing with me? What did I trick you into? I spread my hands. I asked about your favorite, not what you wear the most. On your wedding day, when I saw you in that wedding dress, my heart raced so fast I almost fainted. That should obviously be your favorite color. Her cheeks flushed again. Next question. She forcibly changed the subject. My turn to ask you. Go ahead. What do you like most about me? I thought for a moment, then said seriously, your legs. Owen. Just kidding. I laughed. What I like most is how you act tough but have a soft heart. She froze. Tough on the outside, soft on the inside. That was exactly her. But no one had ever put it so bluntly before. When did you find out? Her voice was a little muffled. The first time we met. I leaned back into the sofa. You were so nervous your palms were sweating. But you still insisted on saying, just browsing, not necessarily buying anything. In the end, you bought 3 books and secretly glanced at me several times. Her face was completely flushed. She thought I wouldn't remember what happened back in high school. How could I not? That was the most important day of my life. The goddess I had a crush on for 2 years finally came to bump into me on purpose. Next question. She forced herself to stay calm. When was the last time you thought of me? I paused for a second. Then I reached out and took her hand. Right now. Her breathing was clearly thrown off. You always do this? She murmured in complaint. Saying things like that without considering the occasion. What occasion? I cut her off. At home. Telling my own wife I miss her. Do I really need to consider the occasion? She was speechless. She wanted to argue, but I had already continued. Next question. A logic puzzle. I picked up a paper cup from the coffee table and twirled it in my hand. 3 people stay at a hotel, each paying $10, totaling $30. The boss says there's a discount today, so it's only $25, and tells the bellboy to refund $5 to them. The bellboy thinks $5 is hard to split evenly, so he keeps 2 for himself and gives 3 back to the guests. So here's the question. Each person actually paid $9. 3 times 9 is 27, plus the 2 the bellboy kept, that's 29. Where did the other dollar go? She frowned. She had heard a similar puzzle before, but couldn't recall it at the moment. Money doesn't just vanish into thin air. She began to analyze. Either there's a problem with the calculation process or, wait, it suddenly clicked for her. 3 times 9 is 27. That 27 already includes the $2 the waiter took. There's no need to add it again. I applauded. Correct. She breathed a sigh of relief and was about to feel smug when I threw out another question. A farmer has 17 sheep. All but 9 die. How many are left? 8. She blurted out. I shook my head. Wrong. How could that be wrong? Isn't 17 minus 9 8? The question says, all but 9 died. I enunciated each word. That means 9 are still alive. She was speechless. She looked like she wanted to hit me. That's just playing with words. That's the puzzle, I said without a hint of guilt. Next question. What gets dirtier the more you wash it? She learned her lesson this time, pausing to think for 3 seconds. The more you wash it, the dirtier it gets. Water? Water, she ventured. I nodded. Correct. She finally turned the tables and immediately gloated. See? I can get it right too. Yeah, you're great. I clapped half-heartedly, then suddenly leaned in. What about the next question? What next question? Does 0.999 equal 1? She was taken aback. Math problem? It's not equal, she replied. 0.999 is always a little less than 1. How could it possibly be equal? I smiled. That kind of you took the bait smile. Then let's prove it. I reached for the sticky notes and pen on the coffee table and started writing. Let x equal 0.999, then 10x equals 9.999. Right? Right.
10x minus x equals 9x.
And 10x minus x also equals 9.999, minus 0.999, which equals 9. She followed my train of thought and nodded. So 9x equals 9, and x equals 1. I set down the pen and looked at her. Proof complete. Her mind was struggling to catch up. Wait, that can't be right? How could 0.999 possibly equal 1? Mathematically, it does. I slid the sticky note toward her. Infinitely close means equal. She stared at the paper, her brows furrowed tightly. Then, by that logic, she suddenly looked up. You and I are infinitely close, which means we are one and the same, right? I was taken aback for a moment. Then I smiled, my eyes narrowing into slits. That's one way to put it. Her heart skipped a beat. She had said something she shouldn't have again. I didn't mean it that way. I know. I cut her off, my voice suddenly dropping. But Claire, what you just said made me really happy. She didn't know what to say, so she just turned her face away and muttered under her breath. Who said I was trying to make you happy? I heard that and laughed even harder. Let's take a break. I got up and headed to the kitchen. What would you like to drink? Water. Sure, honey. She didn't refute the title. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took out a bottle of water. As I poured, I remembered that year in high school. She deliberately bumped into me, knocking the book out of my hands, then said with feigned nonchalance, "Oh, sorry. Let me help you pick it up." She thought I didn't know, but I had known all along, because I was the one who let her knock that book down on purpose. I stood at the bookstore entrance, saw her walking toward me, and immediately picked up that book, pretending to flip through it, just waiting for her to come and bump into me. She thought she was chasing me, but the truth is I was chasing her too. I just had more patience than she did, waiting until she spoke first. I poured water into a glass and carried it back to the living room. She was leaning against the sofa, staring at the sticky note on the coffee table. 0.999 equals 1. Infinitely close means they are the same. I sat down beside her without speaking. Some things don't need to be said. She would come to understand sooner or later. I wasn't playing games with her. I was using the game to tell her, I'm never leaving. The next day, a new director arrived at her company. Let me introduce you, her boss said. This is Nathan, transferred from Beijing. From now on, he'll be the point of contact for your creative department. She looked up and saw a man in a gray suit, around 30 years old, with well-defined features and glasses, looking quite refined. Hello, I'm Nathan. He extended his hand. I look forward to working with you. She shook his hand. Hello, I'm Claire. Nathan's hands were clean, and his handshake was firm but moderate, a well-mannered person. Yet, for some reason, she didn't feel drawn to him. Claire, Nathan said with a smile, I've seen your previous work. It's excellent. I hope we can have more exchanges in the future. Sure. She nodded politely. After the meeting ended, Nathan took the initiative to walk over to her. Claire, are you free at noon? I'd like to take you to lunch and also get a better understanding of the company's situation. She was startled for a moment. Well, think of it as a colleague-to-colleague exchange. Nathan smiled warmly. I'm new here and unfamiliar with many things, so I hope I can count on your help. She thought it over and nodded. All right. At noon, Nathan took her to an upscale restaurant. Claire, he poured her tea. How long have you been with this company? 5 years. To become a director in just 5 years, that's impressive, Nathan remarked. I was in Beijing before, and it took me 8 years just to get promoted to manager. Just lucky, that's all. It's not luck. Nathan looked at her. It's ability. She felt a little uncomfortable under his gaze and lowered her head to drink her tea. Claire? Nathan suddenly said, Do you have a boyfriend? She was taken aback. I'm married. Nathan's eyes darkened for a moment, but he quickly regained his smile. That's a real pity, he said with a smile. But it's okay, we can still be friends. She nodded without saying a word. She felt there was something a bit strange about this Nathan. When I got home that evening, I told her about what happened at the company. How was your day? Not bad. She took off her coat. The new director treated me to dinner. I looked up at her. New director? Yeah, transferred from Beijing. His name's Nathan. She sat down on the sofa. Pretty polite guy. I put down the documents in my hand and walked over to sit beside her. Male or female? Male. I stared at her. He invited you to dinner? Yeah. She nodded. He said he wanted to learn about the company. Just the two of you? Yeah. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I smiled. A cold smile. Claire. Do you really think he invited you to dinner just to learn about the company? She paused for a moment. What else would it be? What else? I leaned closer to her. Is that he wants to pursue you? Her eyes widened. Impossible. I told him I'm married. What difference would it make if I told you? I sneered. I've seen plenty of men like that. They swarm around any pretty woman, married or not. She grew a bit nervous at my words. How do you know? Because I'm a man too. I looked at her. And I understand men better than anyone. She fell silent. She remembered the look in Nathan's eyes today. It was indeed a bit strange. Then, what should I do? She asked. Simple. I stood up and walked over to her. Next time he asks you out, just say. I paused. Your husband won't allow it. She froze. Isn't this a bit childish? Not childish at all, I said, looking at her seriously. It's telling him that you're taken. She looked at me and suddenly laughed. Owen, are you jealous? I paused for a second. Then I admitted it. Yes. She laughed even more. You're actually jealous? Why can't I be jealous? I glared at her. You're my wife. If another man wants to pursue you, who else is supposed to be jealous if not me? She doubled over with laughter. All right, you're jealous, you're jealous. I watched her laugh, and I couldn't help but laugh myself. All right, stop laughing. I ruffled her hair. Be more careful from now on. Don't let other men take advantage of the situation. I know, she nodded. Mr. Owen's lesson is well taken. Yeah. I sat back down on the sofa and picked up the documents to continue reading. But I still felt a bit unsettled inside. Nathan. That name, I made a note of it. The next day, I made a special trip to her company. Mr. Owen? Her boss looked surprised to see me. What brings you here? Just checking on my investment, I said with a smile. And dropping by to see Claire. The boss immediately led him to the creative department. She was in a meeting and froze for a moment when she saw me walk in. Honey, what are you doing here? Just came to see you. I walked over to her and naturally wrapped my arm around her waist. Are you free for lunch? Let's eat together. Everyone in the conference room was stunned, especially Nathan. He stood across the conference table, watching me hold her, his face stiffening for a moment. And this is? He asked. This is my husband, Owen, she introduced. He's an investor in our company. Nathan's expression shifted. So you're Mr. Owen. He extended his hand. I've heard a great deal about you. I shook his hand. I applied a little more pressure than necessary. Mr. Nathan, I said with a smile. I heard you were transferred from Beijing? Yes. Nathan withdrew his hand, his expression somewhat unnatural. Then from now on, I looked at him. Please take good care of my wife. Of course. He nodded, his smile a bit stiff. I held her close and turned to leave. As I reached the door, I glanced back at Nathan. He was staring at my back, his expression complicated. I smiled. That was exactly the effect I wanted. Claire, you're mine. No one else is taking you away. At noon, we had lunch together. Why did you suddenly show up today? She asked. Missed you, I said honestly. She paused for a moment, then smiled. Owen, you're acting so strange today. What's so strange about it? You never used to come find me at the office, she said. Showing up out of the blue today, and holding me in front of everyone, is it because of Nathan? I paused for a second. Then I admitted it. Yes. She laughed even more brightly. Are you really that bothered by him? It's not him I care about. I looked at her. It's you. Her heart skipped a beat. Owen. Claire. I took her hand. I've waited for you all these years, and I finally got to marry you. I paused. How could I ever give you up? Her eyes reddened slightly. You fool. Yeah, I'm a fool. I laughed. But a fool who only loves you. She didn't say a word, just buried her face in my palm. I knew she had heard me, and understood. I wouldn't leave. Never. Later, Nathan voluntarily applied for a transfer back to Beijing. I heard he took on a new project there and was busy as a bee, barely touching the ground. Before he left, he sent me a message. Mr. Owen, your wife is wonderful. Wishing you both happiness. I replied with thank you, and then deleted the chat. Next round, blindfolded. I pulled a silk scarf from behind the sofa cushion. She recognized it, the one she bought on her last business trip. Real silk and quite expensive. When did you take that? When you were packing your luggage, I said with confidence. You never wear it anyway. That still doesn't mean you can just take it. Fine, fine. I'll pay you back later. I shook the scarf open. Come on, close your eyes. She stared at the scarf, her heart racing. Blindfolded. In her own home. Facing me. What was there to be nervous about? She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. The moment the scarf covered her, the world went dark. But my scent lingered. A faint hint of pine mixed with the fresh fragrance of laundry detergent. I was very close. So close that she could feel the slight warmth of my breath brushing against her ear. Can you see? No. Don't peek. Who was peeking? I let out a soft laugh, then took her hand. Her hand was a size smaller than mine, with slender knuckles and a slightly cool palm. Her fingers instinctively curled, but I held them tighter. 10 paper cups are set on the table. My voice came from behind her, low and close. 9 are empty, and 1 has a surprise. Which one do you choose? She reached out to touch them. Her fingertips brushed the first cup light, the second also light, the third. Made your choice. Not yet. She continued feeling around, the fourth, the fifth. Each one was equally light, impossible to tell apart. How about I help you? My hand covered hers, guiding her toward the 6th paper cup. My fingers slid from the back of her hand to her fingertips, then gently pressed down. This one. Her heart was racing like crazy, not because of the game but because my hand hadn't let go. My chest pressed against her back, my breath warm against her ear, and with every word I spoke, my lips seemed to almost brush against her earlobe. I'll pick it myself. She pulled away from my hand and pointed randomly at one. Are you sure? Are you sure? Then open it and take a look. She took off her scarf and looked at the paper cup she had chosen. It was empty. You did that on purpose. She glared at me. What do you mean? I put on an innocent face. You picked it yourself. She didn't believe me. She flipped over all 10 paper cups. Every single one was empty. Where's the surprise? You missed it. I shrugged. The one I picked for you just now, you just had to refuse. She angrily pushed all the paper cups aside. Again. Take your time. I stopped her. First, answer me one question. What? When you were choosing just now, did you deliberately avoid the one I pointed to? She froze. She had, indeed, done it on purpose. Because I was standing too close, her mind went blank, and all she wanted was to get away from me. No, that wasn't it. She wanted to prove she didn't need my help. No. You're lying. I leaned in, my nose almost touching hers. Claire, do you think accepting my help means admitting you need me? Her breath caught. I saw right through everything. It's okay. I pulled back a little, my tone suddenly softening. Anyway, the surprise I've prepared. You'll see it sooner or later. She didn't know how to respond. She could only lower her head, pretending to organize the paper cups. What about the next round? She asked. The next round. I thought for a moment. The loser has to wear the clothes the other person prepares. She looked up, eyeing me warily. What did you prepare? You'll know when the time comes. Tell me first. Not telling. Owen. She glared at me and I smiled. This woman always so adorable. Fine, I'll wear it, she said defiantly. I bet whatever you've prepared is hideous anyway. Don't be so sure. I got up. I'll go get it. Wait here. I walked into the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of the wardrobe, where 2 bags were hidden, one pink and one white. Inside the pink bag was a t-shirt with the words, "My husband is the handsomest," printed on it, styled like a wedding dress with lace trim. Inside the white bag was a pink apron, printed with the words, "Wife is always right." I had prepared these 2 things last week. Originally, I planned to use them on her birthday. I didn't expect they'd come in handy earlier. I carried the 2 bags back to the living room. Here are the clothes. I handed her the pink bag. You change first. She took the bag, opened it, and her face instantly flushed bright red. Owen, are you out of your mind? Out of my mind or not, I'm still your husband. I grinned, looking utterly insufferable. Go change.
I bet.
She clenched her teeth, grabbed the bag, and stormed into the bedroom. I heard the rustling of fabric from inside, followed by her cursing. Owen, just you wait. I smiled, waiting for her to come out. The moment the door opened, I froze. That t-shirt, though it read "My husband is the hottest," was at least a normal t-shirt in shape, except for the lace trim. That ring of lace circled the collar, paired with her long legs in black stockings. The visual impact was off the charts. I looked away. "What's wrong?" She crossed her arms. "Wasn't it you who told me to wear this?" "Can't even look." I coughed and looked at her again. "I'm looking. Of course I'm looking." My gaze slid from her face to her collarbone, then to the lace neckline, before quickly darting away, then back again. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" My voice came out a little hoarse. "What did I deliberately do?" she asked with an innocent look. "You told me to wear it, so I wore it. It's not like I picked it out myself." "Your turn." I handed her the white bag. "What did you prepare?" She leaned in, reaching out to snatch the bag, but I pulled it back and dodged her. "What's the rush? It's not like I'm not going to show you." I smiled, slowly and deliberately untying the bag in front of her, pulling out a pink apron. Printed on the apron were 6 big words. "Whatever the wife says is right." She paused for a moment, then burst out laughing. "When did you buy this?" "Last week." I shook out the apron. "I was going to have you wear it while cooking, but I didn't expect I'd be the one using it first today." Her eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. "Put it on. Put it on."
I bet.
I glanced at her, then stood up, taking off my jacket slowly and deliberately, unbuttoning the top 2 buttons of my shirt to reveal a small patch of skin just below my collarbone. I slipped on the apron, and when tying the strings, I even spun around on purpose, letting the hem of the apron lift slightly. "Does it look good?" I asked. She was already doubled over with laughter on the sofa, clutching her stomach and nodding vigorously. "Good, good. It looks really good." When she finally laughed enough to lift her head, I happened to bend down and lean in close to her. The apron was pink, the shirt white, the collar slightly open. The tip of my nose was less than 10 centimeters from hers. Her laughter came to an abrupt halt. "You stay away from me," she said. I stepped back half a step with a smile. "As you wish, dear." I didn't tease her anymore, but my hand naturally fell on her shoulder, pulling her a little closer to me. She didn't pull away. The 2 of us just leaned against each other like that. One in a wedding t-shirt that read, "My husband is the handsomest." The other in a pink apron that said, "Wife is always right." The scene was absurd, yet warm. "Owen." She suddenly spoke. You." She hesitated for a moment. "Does that scar on your back still hurt?" My hand paused slightly. She was asking about the scar left by the haunted house fire during our sophomore year. "It stopped hurting a long time ago," I said lightly. "It's been 7 years." "But, Claire," I cut her off, my voice suddenly serious. "That scar was my choice. You don't need to feel guilty about it." She lowered her head. Of course she knew, but every time she saw that scar, she would remember that moment. The beam came crashing down, and I threw myself over her, shielding her beneath me. What if that beam had been just a little off? What if the fire had been worse? She didn't dare to think about it. "I sometimes wonder," her voice was very soft, "what would have happened if you hadn't blocked that blow?" "Nothing would have happened," I said. "How could it be noth?" "Because I would have blocked it." I looked down at her, my gaze so earnest it made one's heart tremble. No matter how many times it happened again, I would still block it. Her nose tingled. She buried her face in my chest and said in a muffled voice, "You always do this." "Do what?" "Say things like that, leaving me at a loss for what to do." I smiled, resting my chin on the top of her head. "Then just listen," I said. She didn't speak. She only buried her face deeper. The sound of my heartbeat traveled through my shirt, steady and strong, beat by beat. I held her tighter, thinking to myself, "Silly girl, this scar isn't a burden. It's proof of my love for you." Just as our relationship was getting better and better, her parents suddenly showed up. That evening, we had just finished dinner when the doorbell rang. She went to answer it and then froze. A middle-aged couple stood outside the door, the man in a gray suit, the woman in a cheongsam, both looking quite refined. "Dad, Mom?" Her voice was a bit stiff. "What are you doing here?" "Just came to see you," her mother said with a smile as she walked in. "It's been a while. We missed you." I stood up and looked at her parents. These were the people she never wanted to talk about. They divorced when she was 12, each started a new family, and rarely kept in touch with her since. Uncle, Auntie. I nodded. Please have a seat. Her father glanced at me without a word. Her mother, however, smiled warmly. Owen, you're here too. Perfect timing. There's something we'd like to discuss with both of you. Her expression shifted. Mom, what is it? Let's sit down and talk slowly. Her mother guided her to a seat. Claire, your father and I have been discussing things, and we feel that this marriage of yours might not be quite right. I was stunned. Her face instantly turned cold. What do you mean? What I mean is, her father spoke up, his voice icy. Owen isn't right for you. Why not? He's too busy, her father said. I've looked into it. He often works late into the night, and sometimes he's away on business trips. What kind of life can a man like that give you? I fell silent. Dad, her voice trembled slightly. What gives you the right to say that? Do you even know him? I don't need to know him, her father sneered. I just need to see the results. You've been married for 3 years. How much time has he actually spent with you? She wanted to argue, but no words came, because it was the truth. I really had been too busy. So, her mother continued, we found someone for you, the son of your father's friend. He's a doctor with a stable income and plenty of free time. Enough. She stood up, her voice icy. I'll decide my own life. Claire, her mother frowned. We're doing this for your own good. For my own good? She let out a cold laugh. When you two got divorced, did you ever think about what was good for me? When you each started new families, did you ever ask if I was okay with it? The living room fell silent. Her father's face turned grim. Claire, that's all in the past. Not for me. Her voice choked up a little. Do you have any idea what it was like for me growing up? Living alone at Grandma's, seeing you only once or twice a year, and every time you'd say you were busy. She took a deep breath. And now you suddenly show up, saying you want to set me up with someone? What gives you the right? Her mother's face also changed. Claire, we're just worried about you. I don't need your concern. She turned and walked toward the bedroom. You should leave. Claire. Her father stood up, his voice rising. What kind of attitude is that? I stood up and stepped in front of her. Uncle, my voice was calm. Claire is tired. You should come back another day. Her father glared at me. Owen, who do you think you are? What gives you the right to meddle in our family's affairs? I looked at him, my gaze steady. I am Claire's husband, I said. I have the right to protect her. Her father sneered. Protect? And this so-called protection of yours means leaving her alone at home while you work overtime every day. Yes, I admit I didn't do well enough before. I nodded. But I'll change. Change? Her father scoffed. Can a man's words really be trusted? Whether they can be trusted or not. I met his gaze. Time will tell. Her father was taken aback for a moment. I admit, I continued. I was indeed too busy before and neglected Claire's feelings. That was my fault. But I don't want to lose her because of this. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were red. So, I turned to her parents. Uncle, Auntie, I know you only want what's best for Claire, but please trust me. I won't let her down. Her father remained silent. You two should head back, I said. Claire and I will handle this. Her mother glanced at her father, then let out a sigh. Claire, she said, turning to her. Mom is really worried about you. I know. Her voice was soft. But please trust me. I can take care of myself. Her mother was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. We'll be going now. She stood up. Give us a call when you have time. Okay. Her parents left. Only she and I remained in the living room. She stood still, her shoulders trembling slightly. I walked over and pulled her into my arms. It's okay, I whispered. She buried her face in my chest and said in a muffled voice, I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing? For making you see this. Her voice choked up a little. My parents, I understand. I cut her off. They mean well for you. It's just the wrong way to go about it. She lifted her head and looked at me. Owen. Thank you. I smiled and ruffled her hair. Silly, what's there to thank me for? She didn't speak, just buried her face back into my chest. I held her tightly, thinking to myself that she had been carrying so much. Her parents' divorce and lack of affection had left her with a deep sense of insecurity. She was afraid I would leave like her father did, afraid this marriage would fail like her parents. So she brought up divorce first. Not because she didn't love me, but because she was too scared to love. Claire, I said softly. I'm not going to leave you. Her heart skipped a beat. I know. Her voice was soft. But I'm still afraid. Then let me prove it to you. I looked down at her. For a lifetime. Her eyes reddened again. Owen, you bastard. Yeah, I'm a bastard. I laughed. But I'm a bastard who only loves you. She laughed through her tears. You really know how to talk. Only for you. I lowered my head and gently brushed my lips against hers. Her heart raced, but she didn't pull away. Owen. I love you. I was stunned. It was the first time she had voluntarily said those 3 words. I love you too. I held her tighter. Forever. That night she slept soundly. I lay beside her, watching her sleeping face, thinking to myself that her parents were right. I really hadn't done enough before, but I would change. Starting today, I would spend more time with her, care for her more, and let her know that I wouldn't leave. Never. The next day, I called the office and postponed all my meetings for the following week. Mr. Owen, my assistant said in surprise. You're taking leave? Yes, I replied, to spend time with my wife. My assistant paused for a moment, then smiled. Very well, Mr. Owen. I hung up the phone and turned to look at her. She was still asleep, a faint smile lingering at the corners of her lips. I walked over and gently kissed her forehead. Good morning, sweetheart. She opened her eyes, saw me, and froze for a moment. Don't you have work today? No, I smiled. I'll be with you for the whole week. Her eyes widened. Are you crazy? What about the company? Someone else can handle the company. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. You're more important. Her eyes reddened again. Owen. You don't have to do this. I want to. I looked at her. Claire. I've been neglecting your feelings, and that's my fault. Starting today, I'll change. She didn't say a word, just buried her face in my palm. I knew she had heard me, and believed me. I wouldn't leave. Never. Over the next week, I kept my promise. I had breakfast with her every day, drove her to work, picked her up, and spent our evenings cooking, watching movies, and talking together. She smiled more and more. I knew her heart was slowly beginning to heal. Owen. One night, she suddenly spoke. You don't have to keep me company all the time. She felt a bit embarrassed. You have work to do too. Work can wait. I looked at her. You can't. She blushed and turned her head away. You're such a smooth talker. Well, I admit it. I reached out and pulled her into my arms. Claire. Remember our game? She paused for a moment, then nodded. I remember. There's one more paper cup. I pulled out the cup I'd been hiding from my pocket. The one you didn't pick when you were blindfolded. She stared at the cup. It looked no different from the others. An ordinary white paper cup, light and airy, as if it held nothing. What's inside? Open it and see. She reached out, her fingertips barely brushing the edge of the paper cup before pulling back. Tell me what it is first. Surprise, I said. I just told you. What surprise? You'll know when you open it. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and flipped the paper cup over. The moment the bottom faced upward, something glinted. She froze. It was a diamond ring. Not one of those ostentatiously large stones, but a perfectly modest size, set in a simple platinum band, understated yet exquisite. This is. I bought a new one, I said. You thought your original ring was too small, didn't you? She had said that, indeed. It was on our first wedding anniversary. While washing her hands with the ring on, she noticed the diamond was a bit loose and casually grumbled. This diamond is way too stingy. She thought I hadn't heard. When did you buy it? Last month. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. The divorce agreement, torn into pieces and taped back together. I was planning to give it to you on your birthday, but you gave me this first. She stared at the torn and taped together paper, a mix of emotions churning inside her. When did you tear it up? The night you brought up divorce. I put the paper back into my pocket. After you fell asleep, I tore it up. Then I regretted it, afraid you'd wake up and not find it, so I taped it back together. She didn't know what to say. She thought I didn't care. She thought I would sign it. She thought, Claire. I knelt down on one knee. The living room floor was a bit hard, but I knelt steadily. I know why you asked for a divorce. I looked up at her. You're scared. You're afraid I'll leave like your father did. Afraid this marriage will end like your parents. Afraid that the more you rely on me, the more it'll hurt when you lose me. Her eyes grew warm. You. I know everything, I interrupted, my voice impossibly gentle. You talk in your sleep. When you have nightmares, you call my name. When you're upset, you hide in the kitchen to wash dishes. Claire, did you think I didn't notice? Her tears finally fell. She choked out. I know. I reached out and took her hand. That's why today, from the very first round, I decided to let you win. Because I wanted to tell you, in this clumsy way, that I never thought about leaving. She was stunned. What? In the first round of Q&A, I deliberately answered wrong. I confessed. In the second round of puzzles, I let you get the answer right. In the third round, the blindfolded one, I helped you pick the cup with the ring, even though you didn't choose it. Her eyes widened. You cheated. It's not cheating, I said seriously. It's a strategic loss. She wanted to hit me, but her hand was in mine so she couldn't, and she was still crying. She must have looked absolutely terrible right now. Why did you have to do this? She sobbed. Couldn't you just say it directly? No, I shook my head. You're the type who's tough on the outside but soft on the inside. If I told you outright, you'd never believe me. I had to prove it through my actions. Prove what? Prove that I won't leave. I looked at her seriously. Prove that you deserve to be firmly chosen. I took the diamond ring out of the paper cup and slowly slid it onto her ring finger. Prove that in this lifetime, I belong only to you. She looked at the ring, tears streaming even harder. Owen, you jerk. Yeah, I am. Why do you have to be so good to me? Because you're my wife. She looked up at me, her eyes blurred with tears. I asked for a divorce. Aren't you angry? Angry, I admitted, but even more heartbroken. What's there to feel sorry about? I feel sorry that you're bottling it all up alone, refusing to tell me. I reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face. Claire, from now on, if anything's bothering you, just tell me directly. Okay? Don't carry it all by yourself. She sniffled and nodded. Then, she hesitated for a moment. You can't work overtime every day from now on either. Okay. You have to have at least one meal with me every day. Okay. No working overtime on weekends. Okay. And... She suddenly thought of something, her face flushing again. You're not allowed to lick the soles of my feet with your tongue anymore. I was taken aback for a moment, then burst out laughing. That was an accident. An accident? You did that on purpose. Fine, I did it on purpose. I admitted without a hint of guilt. But your feet really do smell nice. Owen. She lunged at me to hit me, but I caught her and pressed her down into the sofa. We were so close, our breaths mingling. Claire. I lowered my head, resting my forehead against hers. I love you. Her heart skipped a beat. She rarely heard me say those 3 words. I always expressed myself through actions. Cooking for her, staying with her during late nights at work, keeping vigil by her side all night when she was sick. But I seldom said them out loud. I love you too, she whispered, her voice soft as if it might melt away. Even though you're a pervert. I smiled and brushed my lips lightly against hers. Then, for the rest of your life, are you still willing to let this pervert keep clinging to you? Her eyes reddened again, but she deliberately turned her face away and said with a hint of spoiled pride, Fine, you win. You fool. I said nothing more, just tightened my arms and held her closer. Outside the window, the sky had already brightened. Morning light streamed through the gap in the curtains, falling upon us. The divorce agreement was still in my pocket, torn apart and taped back together, crumpled as if nothing had ever happened. But she knew. Some things, once torn apart, could still be pieced back together. Like that piece of paper. Like her sense of security. Like our marriage. As long as I'm here. As long as I keep saying, You're my wife. If I don't protect you, who will? She won't be afraid. A week later, her company held its annual gala, and as the creative director, she had to give a speech on stage. I was also invited as an investor. The gala was lively. She stood on stage in a black gown, speaking with ease and confidence. I stood below, watching her, feeling proud in my heart. This is my wife. Finally, her voice suddenly softened. I want to thank someone. She looked at me. My husband, Owen. All eyes in the audience turned to me. Thank you, she said with a smile, for showing me what it means to be firmly chosen. I was stunned for a moment. Then I smiled. This woman had finally learned to speak her mind. I also want to take this opportunity, she continued, to announce something. She raised her left hand, and the diamond ring on her ring finger sparkled under the lights. This ring was given to me by my husband when he proposed to me again. Gasps rippled through the audience. So, she looked at me, her gaze tender. I want to say to him, Owen, thank you for never giving up on me. Applause erupted from the crowd. I stood frozen in place, my heart racing. This woman, daring to say such things in front of so many people. But I was happy, truly happy. After the annual party ended, we drove home. Claire, I said, gripping the steering wheel, about what you said on stage just now. What about it? She turned to look at me. Didn't you like it? I liked it. I smiled. I really liked it. She smiled too. That's good. She reached out and took my hand. Owen. Thank you. For what? Thank you for not giving up on me. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were a little red, but there was a smile on her lips. Silly. I tightened my grip on her hand. How could I ever give up on you? She didn't say anything, just leaned her head against my shoulder. The night outside the window was beautiful, with neon lights flashing by one after another. But I knew the most beautiful thing wasn't the night view. It was her. It was her willingness to trust me, to give me her heart. Claire, I whispered. I love you. I know. Her voice was soft. I love you too. We exchanged a smile. The car drove into the night, heading home. The divorce papers had already been torn to shreds. But our story was only just beginning, and I finally believed that every crack would be where the light came through.